If you've ever had to smile while your own child talks to you like you're a toddler, then you know the specific quiet kind of furnace that can build in a man's chest. For me, Michael, at 72 years old, that furnace had been burning on low for 5 long years. It started right after my Martha passed. My daughter Clara, in a show of what I thought was filial concern, stepped in to help me with my finances. Help, it turns out, is a very flexible word. In Clara's dictionary, it meant helping herself to my retirement fund, piece by petty piece. She thought my silence was a symptom. She'd look at me with this pitying little smirk, her eyes scanning my face for the telltale signs of dementia she was so sure were there. Every time she'd explain, slowly and loudly, as if I were hard of hearing and not just heartbroken, that the cost of living was going up, I would just nod. I'd sit there at my own kitchen table, the one Martha and I picked out 50 years ago, and watch her tap away at her laptop, balancing my books. She'd announce with a sigh of put-upon martyrdom that she'd reimbursed herself for my groceries, a cool $400 for the week. I'd nod, quiet compliance. In her mind, the circuits in my brain were misfiring, the memories fading, the man I once was dissolving into a fog of old age. But my mind has always been sharp. It's the mind of an accountant, a man who spent 40 years tracking other people's money down to the last penny. My quiet wasn't dementia. It was patience. It was the long, slow, simmering patience of a man gathering evidence. Every single time she reimbursed herself, I'd already fished the actual grocery receipt out of the trash can in the garage where she'd tossed it. The real total, usually around $80 or $90, would be noted in a fine point pen on the back of the much smaller legitimate receipt. I'd then tuck it away. Every time she'd log a payment to a gardener named Mr. Henderson, a man who supposedly came twice a week to tend my modest petunias, I would make a note in my ledger. Mr. Henderson, of course, did not exist. I cut my own grass, just as I always have. My back might ache a little more these days, but the satisfaction of a neat lawn is still one of life's simple pleasures. But according to my bank statements, Mr. Henderson was getting very rich off my flower beds. For 5 years this has been our ritual. Her condescension, my compliance. Her theft, my documentation. In the back of my closet, behind my winter coats and a box of Martha's old photo albums, sits a simple brown shoebox. It's not heavy, but it's dense. It contains 5 years of meticulous, cross-reference proof of her larceny. Receipts, handwritten notes, with dates and times, printouts of bank statements with the fraudulent charges circled in red. It's a monument to her greed and my patience. Next week is my 73rd birthday. Clara, in her role as the dutiful daughter, has arranged a dinner at a fancy restaurant. She loves these public displays of affection. They're the perfect cover for her private contempt. She told me her and her husband Greg are so excited to celebrate me. There will be a cake and toasts, and everyone will say what a wonderful daughter she is for taking such good care of her dear old dad. And I'll let them. I'll smile and nod and play the part of the grateful, slightly confused old man she's cast me as. But when the time comes for the heartfelt speeches, I'll be giving one of my own. Except it won't be a speech. It'll be an invoice. An itemized bill for 5 years of services not rendered and goods not received. I've already printed 3 copies. One for her husband Greg, who I'm sure has enjoyed the fruits of her labor, and one in a crisp manila envelope addressed to the local police department. The furnace in my chest is about to be turned up to high, and for the first time in 5 years the quiet is about to be broken. The inciting incident, the moment the patient's simmer finally boiled over, wasn't even a financial one. It happened last Tuesday. Clara had just left after her weekly bookkeeping session. She'd been particularly condescending that day, explaining to me what a 401k was, as if I hadn't built the very one she was now pilfering. After she left, I was standing in the kitchen, washing my cup, when I realized she'd left her fancy Bluetooth earpiece on the counter. A moment later, it lit up. She must have accidentally dialed me back, or her phone connected to it automatically when she got in her car. And I heard her voice, clear as day. She was talking to Greg. "I swear," she said. And I could hear the derisive laugh in her voice. "It's like taking candy from a baby." I told him groceries were $500 this week, and he just blinked at me. Not a single question. Greg's muffled voice came through. "Is that safe, Clara? 500 is a lot." "Oh, please," she scoffed. "He wouldn't know if it was $5 or 5,000. His brain is soup. I'm just managing the inevitable decline. Think of it as a pre-inheritance. Besides, we need that new patio set. The one with the fire pit." A pre-inheritance. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just the theft. It was the justification, the casual cruelty, the sheer breathtaking entitlement of it all. She wasn't just stealing my money. She was stealing my dignity, my memory of the man I was, writing me off as a living ghost whose only remaining purpose was to fund her lifestyle. That was the moment. The patience snapped. The promise I made to Martha twisted into a new shape. It wasn't about revenge, not then. It was about correction. A market correction, you might say. And the bill was coming due. The silence in the house after that accidental phone call was different. It was no longer the quiet of patience. It was the heavy humming silence of a machine powering up. For 5 years I had lived in a state of suspended animation, a sort of self-imposed emotional purgatory. I replayed the conversation over and over in my head. "His brain is soup." The words echoed in the hollow spaces Martha had left behind. Was that what she really thought? My own daughter. I walked from the kitchen into the living room, my hand trailing along the back of the sofa we'd bought together in 1978. I sank into my armchair, the leather cool and familiar against my skin. The breakdown wasn't what you'd think. There were no tears, no shouting into the empty rooms. It was an implosion. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach, a physical manifestation of 5 years of swallowed anger and unspoken grief. I felt old. For the first time, I truly felt the 72 years in my bones, not because my mind was failing, but because my heart had finally acknowledged the depth of the betrayal. My daughter didn't just think I was a fool, she was counting on it. She was banking on it. My mind, that sharp accountant's mind she so casually dismissed, began to spool backwards, unspooling the thread of this long deception. It started as so many family tragedies do, with a death. When Martha died, the light went out of my world. We'd been married for 48 years. She wasn't just my wife, she was my compass, my partner, the steady hand on the tiller of our lives. Her battle with cancer was short and brutal, and when it was over I was adrift in a sea of grief and paperwork. Clara swooped in. I remember her sitting right where I was now, on the ottoman, her expression a perfect mask of loving concern. She held my hand. It felt small and cold in hers. She said, "Dad, you're exhausted. You're grieving. The last thing you need to worry about is paying bills and managing investments. Let me take that burden off your shoulders. I'm here for you." And I, in my fog of loss, agreed. It seemed like a kindness. I was so tired. The thought of wrestling with insurance forms and pension administrators was overwhelming. We went to my lawyer, a man I'd known for 30 years, who was retiring the following month, and signed the paperwork for a durable power of attorney. I remember the lawyer, a good man named Bill, looking at me over his spectacles. He asked, "Michael, are you absolutely sure about this?" And Clara squeezed my hand and answered for me. "Of course he is. It's for the good of the family.
It's what Mom would have wanted. What Mom would have wanted. That was the
lever she used, the key that unlocked my vault, and for a long time I believed it. The first discrepancy was almost laughably small. It was about 3 months after Martha's passing. Clara had started doing my grocery shopping. She left the bags on the counter and a post-it note on the fridge. Groceries $187.50, reimbursed from account. I opened the fridge. There were a few things: a carton of milk, some eggs, a loaf of bread, a head of lettuce, and a package of chicken breasts. I've been buying my own food for over half a century. I knew, with absolute certainty, that the contents of those bags didn't cost more than $50. I didn't confront her. My first thought was, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm out of touch with prices. Maybe she bought organic, gluten-free, artisan, whatever. I made excuses for her, just as Martha always had. That was Clara's story, really. She was our only child, and Martha had adored her with a fierce, protective love that often blinded her to Clara's faults. I remembered a time when Clara was in college. She'd called home, hysterical, because she'd maxed out her credit card and couldn't pay her rent. I was ready to read her the riot act, to teach her a lesson about responsibility. But Martha intercepted the call. She came to me later, her eyes pleading. She said, "Michael, she's just a kid. She made a mistake. Let's just help her out this once. We can't let her be evicted." So I helped her out, and it was never just that once. There was always another crisis, another shortfall, another poor decision that needed a financial cushion. Martha was the cushion, and when she was gone, Clara expected me to become one. After that first grocery bill, I started paying attention. I didn't want to believe it, but my training wouldn't let it go. The next week she did it again, a charge for $210. This time before she arrived, I had taken out the trash. After she left, I went out to the garage and quietly retrieved the bag she'd tossed her own things into. Tucked inside a crumpled coffee cup was the receipt from the supermarket. The real total $62.15. I stood there in my garage, the smell of gasoline and old newspapers hanging in the air, and I held that small piece of paper in my hand. It felt like a confession. The sheer pettiness of it was what struck me. This wasn't a desperate act. This was a habit. This was a contempt. She was skimming a little over $100, confident her old man was too grief-stricken and senile to notice. Why didn't I say something right then? I've asked myself that question 1,000 times. The answer is complicated. It's wrapped up in my promise to Martha. On one of her last good days, she'd grabbed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. She said, "Michael, promise me you'll look after our girl. She acts tough, but she's fragile. Don't let her drift away. Keep the family together." And I promised. I thought keeping that promise meant enduring this. I thought it meant swallowing the quiet indignities to maintain the illusion of a relationship, to keep the lines of communication open. I thought if I just stayed quiet, stayed patient, she would eventually grow up, that her conscience would kick in. I would be the steady, forgiving father, and she would eventually become the daughter Martha always wanted her to be. So I took the receipt, went to my office, and opened a fresh ledger book. I wrote the date. I wrote the fraudulent charge amount. I wrote the actual amount, and I taped the receipt to the page. That was the first entry in what would become the Shoebox Chronicles. Over the years, the thefts became bolder. The non-existent gardener, Mr. Henderson, was her first real invention. $300 a month, every month, for 5 years. Then came the emergency plumbing repairs for phantom leaks, the annual security system maintenance for a system I didn't own, the property tax consultation fees. Each one was a fiction, a line item in the budget of her life, paid for by the ghost in my armchair. I documented it all. I became a silent archivist of my own exploitation. The shoebox filled up. One shoebox became two. I never looked at the running total. I didn't want to. To see the full sum of her betrayal quantified in a single number felt like it would be too much to bear. It was easier to process it in small, manageable chunks of petty fraud. With each new entry, a piece of my hope for her died. The daughter I loved, the little girl who used to sit on my lap and help me with the Sunday crossword puzzle, was gone. In her place was this stranger, this smiling predator who saw me not as her father, but as a resource to be drained. And then I heard her voice through that earpiece. Asterisk. His brain is supia, a pre-inheritance. It wasn't just a confirmation of what I already knew. It was the tone, the gleeful, dismissive cruelty. In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity that my patience wasn't protecting her or our relationship. It was enabling her. My silence wasn't a virtue. It was a poison, allowing the worst parts of her nature to flourish, unchecked. My promise to Martha had been corrupted. Looking after Clara didn't mean letting her destroy her own soul with 1,000 tiny thefts. It meant holding up a mirror and forcing her to see the person she had become. The cold knot in my stomach tightened, but it was no longer dread. It was resolve, a cold, hard, diamond-like resolve. The accountant in me, the man who believed in balanced books and consequences for miscalculations, took over. The charade was over. It was time to audit the last 5 years of my life. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about making the numbers add up. It was about justice, and I realized, standing there in the deafening quiet of my empty house, that sometimes justice feels a lot like revenge. The first phone call I made was to Arthur. Arthur Bellamy has been my best friend for 40 years. We met when our companies were on opposite sides of a merger negotiation. We spent a month tearing each other's arguments to shreds in a boardroom, and by the end of it we'd developed such a mutual respect that we went out for a steak and a bottle of bourbon to celebrate the deal closing. We've been playing chess and drinking bourbon together ever since. Arthur is a retired corporate lawyer, but more than that, he's a man with a mind like a steel trap and a spine to match. He was the only person on earth I could trust with this. He answered on the second ring, his voice the same gravelly baritone it's been for decades. "Michael, I was just thinking about you. Up for a game on Thursday?" "Arthur," I said, my own voice sounding thin to my ears, "I need to talk to you. Can you come over?" The lack of pleasantries was all he needed. "I'm on my way," he said, and the line went dead. An hour later he was sitting in the armchair opposite mine, a glass of my best single malt in his hand. I hadn't said a word. I'd just walked to the closet, retrieved the 2 shoeboxes and placed them on the coffee table between us. Arthur looked at the boxes, then at me. "Martha's old photos?" he asked gently. "No," I said, my voice cracking slightly. I cleared my throat. "It's my life's work. The last 5 years of it, anyway." I opened the first box and took out the top ledger. I opened it to the first page and handed it to him without a word. He put on his reading glasses, his brow furrowed in concentration. I watched his eyes scan the neat columns, the dates, the descriptions, the 2 different monetary amounts, the taped receipts. He flipped a page, then another. His expression shifted from confusion to dawning comprehension, and then to a slow gathering storm of righteous fury. He read for a solid 10 minutes, the only sound in the room the rustle of turning pages and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Finally he closed the ledger, took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He looked at me, and his eyes, usually full of wry humor, were hard as granite. "Michael," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "how long has this been going on?" 5 years, I said, "since Martha passed." 5 years, he repeated, not as a question but as a statement of profound disbelief. He looked at the shoeboxes. "And this is all of it, all the documentation, every penny?" I confirmed. He was quiet for a long moment, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Why, Michael? Why did you let it go on for so long? This is grand larceny. This is elder abuse. We could have put a stop to this years ago." And so I told him. I told him about my promise to Martha, about my foolish hope that Clara would come to her senses, about the gradual erosion of my will to confront her. I told him about being so mired in grief that letting her take over felt easier than fighting. I told him everything, ending with the story of the earpiece and the phone call. His brain is soup. When I finished, the silence returned, but Arthur filled it. That little viper, he breathed, his knuckles white around his glass. That ungrateful, thieving little viper. He stood up and began to pace, his lawyerly instincts kicking in. Okay, so the passivity is over. The wait-and-see-his approach has failed spectacularly. What's the new plan? That's why you're here, I said. I have an idea, but I need to know if it's sound, or if I'm just an old man, out for blood. Sometimes, Michael, he said, stopping his pacing to look me square in the eye, a little bloodletting is exactly what the situation calls for. Let's hear it. I laid it out for him. The birthday dinner, the invoice, the copies for her husband and the police, the public, undeniable confrontation. He listened intently, nodding slowly. When I was done, a slow, grim smile spread across his face. It's theatrical, he said. It's dramatic. It's utterly brutal. I love it. It's not just a legal move. It's a strategic one. You're not just exposing the crime. You're dismantling her entire life, her marriage, her social standing. You're burning it all to the ground with the truth. Is it too much? I asked. The question genuine. A part of me, the father part, still flinched at the thought of what I was about to do. Arthur sat back down and leaned forward, his expression serious. Michael, let me tell you something. My son Robert, you know Robert. Good kid but weak. His wife, that woman a piranha in pearls. For the last 10 years they've treated me like a bank. Not a father, not a grandfather to their kids. A bank. It's always, Dad, we're a little short for the mortgage this month. Dad, the property taxes are higher than we expected. Dad, the boys need new hockey equipment. It's so expensive. Never a thank you. Never a how are you doing, Dad. Never an invitation to a school play or a hockey game. Just a handout. I'd had no idea. Arthur always presented such a stoic front. It's not theft like what Clara's doing, he continued, his voice heavy with a familiar weariness. But it's the same disease. It's the entitlement. It's the belief that what's ours is theirs by right, that our life's work is just a savings account for them to draw on. I've enabled it. I've been weak, telling myself it's for my grandkids. But what am I teaching them? That grandpa is a pushover. That responsibility is for other people. Your situation, Michael, it's mine, magnified by 100. You have the proof. You have the receipts. What you're doing, it's not just for you. You have to do it. You have to draw a line in the sand so hard they can feel the earthquake in their bones. His confession, his own quiet pain, solidified my resolve. He was right. This wasn't just about my money or my pride. It was a stand against the casual, corrosive disrespect that so many of my generation quietly endure. It wasn't about revenge, until it was about setting a precedent. For the next 4 hours, we worked. Arthur, in his element, spread the contents of the shoeboxes across my dining room table. We sorted, we collated, we cross-referenced. It was a mountain of betrayal. His legal mind saw patterns I had missed. He pointed out how the thefts escalated after specific events, a market downturn, a vacation she took, the purchase of a new car. She was using my accounts to smooth out the rough patches in her own profligate life. We need a full accounting, he declared. Not an estimate, an exact figure, down to the cent. And we need to add interest, a penalty for late payment. Let's use the standard credit card default rate, 29.99%, compounded annually. Let's see how she likes those numbers. The idea was vicious, and I embraced it. I retrieved my old 10-key calculator from my office, the one with the satisfying clack, clack, clack of the keys, and we got to work. Arthur would call out a fraudulent charge, and I would punch it into the calculator, running a separate calculation for the accrued interest over the years. The numbers climbed at an alarming rate. The petty thefts, the $100 grocery pads, the $300 phantom gardeners, when aggregated and compounded, became a monster. By the end of the evening, the dining table was covered in neat stacks of paper, and my calculator tape stretched halfway across the room. We had a final number, $78,421.16. I stared at the number. I had deliberately avoided tallying it up before, and seeing it now, in black and white, took my breath away. It was a staggering sum. The price of a luxury car, a down payment on a house, the cost of 5 years of my daughter's love. That's the number, Arthur said, a note of grim satisfaction in his voice. That's the invoice. He then laid out the next steps. Tomorrow morning, you're going to the bank, not your usual branch. Go to the main headquarters downtown. Ask for the head of private banking. You're a long-time customer with significant assets. They'll see you. You will present a notarized letter, which I will draft tonight, revoking Clara's power of attorney immediately. You will close all existing accounts she has access to. You will then open a new set of accounts at a completely different bank. Transfer everything. Leave a pittance in the old checking account, maybe $500. Enough to make her think it's just a temporary glitch. And the house? I asked. My name was on the deed, but she'd been handling the property tax payments. Good question, he mused. We'll check the county records online tonight to make sure she hasn't tried anything clever, like placing a lien against it. But for now, the financial severance is the priority. Cut off the supply line. That's the first move in the silent takeover. The plan was beautiful in its cold, clinical precision. While she was planning my birthday party, I would be systematically dismantling the financial empire she'd built on the foundation of my supposed senility. I spent the next 2 days executing the plan with the focus of a man on a mission. I typed up the invoice myself on my old desktop computer, using a sterile corporate template. Item, date, description, amount due. At the bottom in bold red letters, total due $78,421.16. Payment due within 30 days to avoid legal proceedings. I printed the 3 copies on heavy cream-colored bond paper. They felt substantial in my hand. They felt like justice. Arthur had emailed me the notarized letter, and I'd gone to a small mailing service in the next town over to have it stamped and signed. I didn't want to use anyone local who might know Clara. Walking into the main branch of my bank felt like stepping onto a battlefield. I was calm on the outside, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. I did as Arthur instructed. I was polite but firm, and within 20 minutes I was sitting in a plush office with a woman named Miss Albright, a vice president with sharp eyes and an even sharper suit. I didn't give her the whole story. I just said I was restructuring my estate and wished to sever a previous power of attorney agreement. I handed her the notarized letter. She read it, her face a mask of professional neutrality. She made a few phone calls, her voice low and authoritative. There was typing, more phone calls. After about 30 minutes she turned back to me. "It's done, Mr. Evans," she said. "The POA has been revoked.
All access from Miss Thorne's credentials has been terminated. As per your request, the funds from your accounts will be wired to the new institution by the end of the business day. Is there anything else I can help you with? I almost smiled. Clara's married name was Thorne. I was still Evans. It felt significant. No, Miss Albright, I said, standing up and shaking her hand. You've been a great help. Walking out of that bank and into the bright afternoon sun, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized
I was carrying. It was the weight of 5 years of silence. The first shot had been fired, and she didn't even know the war had begun. The first sign of the fallout came 2 days before my birthday dinner. It was a Thursday afternoon. I was in the garage tuning up the lawnmower, my hands greasy and my mind blissfully empty. My phone sitting on the workbench buzzed. It was Clara. I wiped my hands on a rag and answered, putting on my best slightly confused hard-of-hearing old man voice. "Hello, Dad? It's me." Her voice was tight, laced with an irritation she was trying and failing to conceal. "Listen, something weird is going on with your bank card." I feigned ignorance. "Oh, what's that, dear?" "I was trying to buy your birthday gift, that new cashmere sweater you wanted. I had never mentioned a cashmere sweater in my life, and the card was declined," I said, infusing my voice with befuddlement. "That's very strange. There should be plenty of money in there. Are you sure you typed the numbers right?" "Dad, I've been using the card for 5 years. I know how it works," she snapped. The irritation was winning. I tried it twice. Then I tried to log into the online portal to see what was going on, and it said my credentials were invalid. "Did you change the password and forget to tell me?" Her accusation hung in the air, dripping with the assumption of my incompetence. "It was perfect." "Goodness, no," I said. "I wouldn't know how to do that. It must be some sort of computer glitch with the bank. These things happen, you know. Technology." There was a frustrated sigh on the other end of the line. "Fine, I'll call the bank's helpline. I need to get this sorted out. The dinner reservation is tomorrow night, and I need to pay the deposit." "You do that, dear," I said, my voice full of encouragement. "Let me know what they say." I hung up the phone and a slow, cold smile spread across my face. I could picture her, sitting in her expensive SUV, stabbing at her phone with a perfectly manicured finger, getting increasingly furious as she was met with a digital brick wall. The silent takeover was proceeding exactly as planned. The first tendrils of panic were beginning to sprout. About an hour later, my phone rang again. This time her voice was stripped of all pretense. It was sharp, bordering on frantic. "They won't talk to me." "Who won't talk to you, Clara?" "The bank. I got through to a representative, and they said they can't discuss the account with me. They said my name isn't on it. They said I don't have authorization." "What did you do?" The "you" was an accusation. The confused old man was suddenly a suspect. "I haven't done anything," I said, my voice a placid lake of calm. "I've been right here working on the lawnmower. It must be a mistake on their end. A big mix-up. Why don't you try again in the morning?" "A mix-up, Dad. They were very specific. They said my power of attorney has been revoked." "Did you go to the bank? Did you talk to someone without telling me?" I let a long pause hang in the air. I let her imagine me, doddering and confused, accidentally signing the wrong form, undoing her careful work. "Well," I said slowly, "I did have to go downtown for that podiatrist appointment on Monday. Maybe I stopped in. My memory, you know. It's not what it used to be." This was the bait. I was feeding her the very narrative she had created. She bit. "Oh my God," she breathed, a mixture of fury and exasperation. "You probably told them to cancel the wrong thing." "Dad, you don't understand. I manage everything. The mortgage payments, the taxes, the utilities. You've completely screwed everything up. I need access to those funds to take care of you. The hypocrisy was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. She needed my money to take care of me. It was a thing of beauty. Don't you worry, dear, I said, my voice soothing. I'm sure it's all a misunderstanding. We can talk about it at dinner tomorrow night. I'm so looking forward to it. We'll get it all straightened out then. Just you and me and Greg. A nice family chat. I could hear her sputtering on the other end, but I cut her off. I have to go now, Clara. My hands are all greasy. I'll see you tomorrow at 7. And I hung up. The peace lasted for approximately 3 hours. My front doorbell rang insistently around 6 o'clock. I looked through the peephole. It was Clara, of course. Her face was flushed, her hair slightly askew. The mask of the calm, capable daughter had slipped, revealing the panicked, entitled woman underneath. I didn't open the door. I let her ring it a few more times before I spoke through the intercom system I'd had installed last year and paid for myself in cash. Yes, who is it? Dad. It's me. Open the door, she demanded. Clara, what a surprise. Is everything all right? No, everything is not all right. We need to go to the bank first thing in the morning and fix what you did. You have no idea the mess you've made. Let me in. I don't think that's a good idea, Clara, I said, my voice even and calm. I'm just about to sit down for my dinner, and you look a little upset. We agreed we would discuss this tomorrow evening. Her face, magnified by the small fisheye lens of the camera, contorted with rage. Upset? Of course I'm upset. You've locked me out of everything. How am I supposed to pay your bills? How am I supposed to manage your life if you pull stunts like this? Do you want the power turned off? Do you want to be foreclosed on? You need me. There it was, the core of her belief system, that I was helpless, and she was my savior. The thought that I might be capable of managing my own affairs was so alien to her that it didn't even register as a possibility. All my bills are on auto pay from my new accounts, dear, I said pleasantly. They were taken care of days ago. There's no need to worry about a thing. Her jaw dropped. I could see the gears turning in her head, the pieces not fitting into the neat little puzzle she had constructed. New accounts? What are you talking about? She stammered. What new accounts? Like I said, I replied, my patience a weapon. We can have a full and frank discussion about my new financial arrangements at my birthday dinner. It's a celebration after all. Now if you'll excuse me, my soup is getting cold. Please don't make a scene. The neighbors are watching. I saw her glance at Mrs. Henderson's house next door, where the curtain in the front window twitched. The threat of public embarrassment, the one thing she truly feared, hit its mark. She deflated, her shoulders slumping in defeat. Fine, she hissed into the intercom. Fine, but you'd better have a good explanation for this, Dad. You have no idea what you're doing. Oh, I think I do, I said softly, more to myself than to her, and I switched off the intercom. I watched her stomp back to her car and peel away from the curb, her tires squealing in protest. The silent takeover was complete. The supply lines were cut. The enemy was in disarray. All that was left was the final confrontation, and I was, for the first time in a very long time, looking forward to my birthday. Clara's panic didn't just radiate, it metastasized. I imagine her phone call to her husband, Greg, was a masterclass in shrieking hysteria. Greg was a man who enjoyed the good life but disliked any discussion of how it was funded. He was a partner in her deception through comfortable, willful ignorance. He reaped the benefits, the expensive vacations, the top-of-the-line grill on their new patio, the European cars, without ever having to get his hands dirty. He just saw Clara as a wizard who could somehow make their upper-middle-class salaries stretch to a 1% lifestyle. Now the magic was gone, and he was being asked to look behind the curtain. I know this because Greg called me. It was later that evening, around 9 o'clock. His tone was a clumsy attempt at male camaraderie, the kind of voice a man uses when he's trying to handle a situation his wife has messed up. Michael, he started a little too jovially. Greg here.
Listen, Claire's a bit spun up about this whole bank thing. Sounds like there's been some kind of mix-up. She's worried about you, you know. Worried that you might have gotten some bad advice, or that you're not thinking clearly. The insinuation was clear. He was trying a softer version of Claire's approach, the concerned son-in-law routine. My thinking has never been clearer, Greg, I said, my voice flat and devoid of the folksy confusion I'd used with Clara. This was a different audience. There has been no mix-up. I've simply decided to resume management of my own financial affairs. It was time.
There was a pause. This wasn't the response he was expecting. Right, right. Of course. It's your money, Michael. No one's saying it isn't. It's just, well, Clara has a system, you know. She's been doing it for years. It's a lot for a man your age to suddenly take on. We just want to make sure you're protected. Protected from what, Greg? I asked, the question sharp and pointed. From paying my own bills, or from having my accounts drained to pay for things I never bought? The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I had just put the cards on the table, face up. I could hear him breathing, the sound of a weak man caught in a trap he hadn't seen. I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered, his jovial tone gone, replaced by a nervous tremor. Don't you? I pressed. You didn't wonder where the money for that new patio set with the fire pit came from, the one she was talking about on the phone the other day. You must have known your combined salaries couldn't cover your lifestyle, or maybe you just preferred not to ask. That's a form of participation, you know. He started to bluster. Now wait a minute, Michael. I won't be accused. I'm not accusing you of anything, Greg. I cut in, my voice like ice. I'm just stating facts. The fact is, my financial assistance program has ended, effective immediately. You and Clara are on your own. I'm sure you'll manage just fine. We can discuss the finer points of your severance package tomorrow night at dinner. Don't be late. I hung up before he could respond. I had just planted a bomb in the middle of their marriage. Greg was a creature of comfort and convenience. He was an accomplice, but I suspected he lacked the stomach for a real fight, especially one that could have legal ramifications for him. Clara was now truly isolated. Her support system was not a partner, but a co-conspirator who was likely having second thoughts about the conspiracy. The family, such as it was already beginning to fracture. Clara's desperation reached its peak the next morning, on the day of my birthday. She tried a new tactic, emotional blackmail. A string of text messages began to arrive, each one more pathetic than the last. Dad, I can't believe you're doing this. After everything I've done for you, Mom would be so disappointed in you, treating me this way. If you don't fix this, you'll be all alone. Is that what you want? To die alone? I read each message, and I felt nothing. The well of my paternal guilt had run dry. Her threats were like arrows bouncing off a stone wall. She was no longer my daughter, the one I had to protect. She was an adversary, and these were the desperate flailing attacks of a cornered animal. The power had shifted completely. For 5 years, she held all the cards. She had the access, the authority, the narrative of my decline. I had only my silence and my shoebox. But by making one quiet, decisive move, I had flipped the entire board. I now held the power, the evidence, and the moral high ground. Her only weapons were insults and empty threats, and they were useless. She thought my quiet was a sign of my weakness, but she never understood that her power was entirely dependent on my compliance. The moment I stopped complying, her power vanished like a puff of smoke. I spent the rest of the day in peaceful solitude. I did a little gardening, real gardening, not the fictional, expensive kind. I read the newspaper. I spoke to Arthur on the phone, giving him a quick update. He chuckled. The rats are starting to turn on each other. Beautiful. Stick to the plan, Michael. Don't engage. Let her stew in the mess she's made. See you tonight. I wouldn't miss this for the world. I had invited Arthur to the dinner. He would be my witness, my moral support, and the quiet, imposing presence that would let Clara and Greg know this was not just a family spat. This was a formal proceeding. The shift was absolute. I was no longer the defendant, the confused old man being managed. I was the judge, and court was about to be in session. The restaurant was exactly the kind of place Clara would choose. It was called Orangery, a name that promised a level of continental sophistication the food could never actually deliver. It was all dark wood, hushed lighting, and waiters who spoke in theatrical whispers. It was a stage, and Clara had cast herself as the star of tonight's production, the dutiful daughter. She and Greg were already at the table when Arthur and I arrived. They both stood up, their faces tight with forced smiles. Clara was wearing a severe black dress, as if she were in mourning for her recently deceased income stream. Greg just looked pale and sweaty in his expensive suit. "Dad, happy birthday," Clara chirped, leaning in to give me an air kiss that smelled of expensive perfume and desperation. She ignored Arthur completely. "Hello, Clara." "Greg," I said, my voice neutral. "You know my friend Arthur Bellamy." Greg shook Arthur's hand weakly, his eyes darting around nervously. "Good to see you, Arthur," he mumbled. We sat. The tension at the table was a physical presence. It was so thick you could have spread it on the complimentary breadsticks. Clara and Greg attempted some small talk about the weather, about traffic, but their words were brittle, shattering in the heavy silence that followed each attempt. Arthur and I were content to let them squirm. We were in no hurry. The waiter, a young man with an unfortunate mustache, came to take our order. Clara tried to take control, as was her habit. "Dad will have the salmon," she announced. "He needs to watch his cholesterol." "Actually," I said, looking directly at the waiter, "I'll have the 20-ounce ribeye, medium rare, with the loaded baked potato, and a bottle of your best Cabernet Sauvignon." "The whole bottle." Clara's jaw tightened. Greg shifted uncomfortably in his seat. It was a small act of rebellion, but it was a clear signal. The old script was being thrown out. The meal was an exercise in sustained agony for them. Arthur and I spoke quietly about a recent chess match, about a book he was reading, about anything and everything other than the obvious. We were two old friends enjoying a birthday dinner. Clara and Greg picked at their food, their gazes flicking between me and each other, a silent, frantic conversation passing between them. Finally, the plates were cleared. The waiter asked if we'd be having dessert. "Yes," I said. "I believe we will. But first, I believe it's time for the speeches." Clara visibly braced herself. This was it, the moment of confrontation. I remained seated. I reached into the inner pocket of my suit jacket, the one I'd had tailored for Martha's funeral and hadn't worn since. I pulled out 3 long cream-colored envelopes. I slid one across the table to Clara. I slid the second one to Greg. The third, I placed on the table next to my wine glass. "Clara, Greg," I began, my voice calm and measured, resonating in the quiet restaurant. "Thank you for arranging this lovely dinner to celebrate my 73rd birthday. It's a milestone, to be sure, a time for reflection, and in reflecting on the past few years, I've realized that I have been remiss. I've allowed an outstanding debt to go uncollected for far too long. I thought for my birthday this year, instead of receiving gifts, I would present an invoice." Clara's hands were trembling as she picked up the envelope. Greg stared at his as if it were a venomous snake. "Go on," I encouraged. "Open it." Clara tore hers open with a clumsy ripping sound. Her eyes scanned the first page. I watched the color drain from her face, leaving a pasty gray mask. Her breathing became shallow.
Greg, emboldened by his wife's reaction, opened his. His reaction was less dramatic, but more telling. His eyes widened, his mouth fell slightly open, and he looked at his wife with an expression of pure, unadulterated horror. He was seeing the full scope of her betrayal, and his own complicity, laid out in black and white. As you can see, I continued, my voice cutting through the silence. It's an itemized list, 5 years of services and reimbursements, all meticulously documented. I have the corresponding receipts, bank statements, and sworn affidavits in a safe deposit box. For example, I said, tapping the invoice in front of her, on April 17th, 2022, there's a charge for emergency roof repair in the amount of $2,500. But the roofer I hired to inspect my roof last month confirmed it hasn't been touched in at least a decade. Funny that I let that hang in the air. Or my personal favorite, I went on, the monthly $500 charge for a long-term care insurance policy you supposedly took out for me. I called the insurance company. No such policy exists. That alone accounts for $30,000 of the total. Clara finally found her voice. It was a ragged whisper. This is insane. You're confused. These are legitimate expenses. Greg wasn't looking at me. He was staring at Clara. The insurance policy, he choked out. You told me that was a real thing. You showed me the paperwork. The paperwork was a forgery. Arthur interjected smoothly, speaking for the first time, a rather clumsy one at that. You can't prove any of this, Clara shrieked, her voice rising, drawing stares from the surrounding tables. This is slander. You're a senile old man who's being manipulated by him. She pointed a shaking finger at Arthur. I held up my hand to silence her. Clara, it's all proven, every line item, the total. As you can see at the bottom of the last page is $78,421.16. I've included a modest interest penalty for the delay in payment. I took a sip of my wine. You have 30 days to present me with a full and binding repayment plan. If you fail to do so, this third envelope, I said, tapping the one on the table, which contains a complete copy of this invoice and a selection of the most compelling evidence, will be hand-delivered to Detective Miller at the Financial Crimes Unit. He's an old friend from my Rotary Club. I've already given him a preliminary call. He's very interested in cases of elder financial abuse. The word police finally broke through Greg's denial. Clara, he whispered, his voice shaking. What did you do? I took care of him, she sobbed, tears of rage and self-pity streaming down her face. I did everything for him. I deserved it. And there it was, the confession, the raw, ugly truth of her entitlement. I stood up, placing my napkin on the table. Arthur stood with me. The choice is yours, Clara, I said, my voice leaving no room for negotiation, restitution, or prosecution. My new lawyer will be in touch with you tomorrow to discuss the terms. Happy birthday to me. I turned and walked away, Arthur right beside me. I didn't look back. I could hear Clara's hysterical sobs, Greg's frantic whispering, but for the first time in 5 years it was just noise. The furnace in my chest was finally cooling. Its purpose served. The vindication wasn't hot and fiery. It was cold, clean, and quiet. It was the simple, satisfying click of a ledger book being closed on a balanced account. The aftermath was both exactly what I expected and more devastating than I could have imagined.
Clara predictably did not handle her fall from grace with anything resembling grace. For the first week, my phone was bombarded with a chaotic symphony of her emotions. There were tearful, pleading voicemails, full of revisionist history where she was the overworked martyr and I was the ungrateful tyrant. There were angry, sputtering texts accusing Arthur of being a manipulative gold digger and me of having lost my mind. Then came the threats, that I would die alone, that she would tell everyone what a monster I was. I listened to none of it, and deleted it all. The lines of communication were closed for good. The real blow to her, however, came from a direction she never anticipated. Greg left her. As I suspected, he was a man of immense cowardice. Faced with the stark reality of his wife's criminality and the very real possibility of being implicated as an accessory, he folded. Arthur's lawyer, a sharp woman named Diane, had sent a separate letter to Greg's personal attorney outlining his potential legal exposure. It was a strategic move on Arthur's part, designed to sever Clara's last remaining pillar of support. It worked beautifully. Greg, it turned out, was not willing to sacrifice his comfortable life and professional reputation for the woman who had funded it with stolen money. He moved out of their oversized house within 2 weeks, filing for divorce shortly after. Stripped of her husband, her reputation, and her illegal income stream, Clara had no choice but to capitulate. Her lawyer contacted Diane and agreed to the repayment terms. The house, the one with the brand new patio set she was so proud of, had to be sold. The equity was used to pay me back in a single lump sum. The wire transfer of $78,421.16 appeared in my new bank account 28 days after my birthday dinner. I didn't feel a thrill seeing the number. I just felt a sense of rightness, of a debt being paid. I had instructed Diane that upon receipt of the funds, no criminal charges would be pressed. My goal was never to see my daughter in a prison cell. My goal was consequences, and the life she had built for herself, a life built on lies and disrespect, was now in ruins. That was consequence enough. My life, on the other hand, has become wonderfully, blessedly quiet. But it's a new kind of quiet. It's not the silence of endurance, but the silence of serenity. The house no longer feels empty. It feels peaceful. I've taken up woodworking, something I always wanted to do but never had the time for. My garage is now filled with the smell of sawdust and varnish, the satisfying sounds of a saw cutting through pine. I built a birdhouse for the backyard, and I spend my mornings on the porch, drinking my coffee and watching the finches come and go. Arthur and I took a trip. We went to Scotland for 2 weeks, something we'd talked about for 30 years. We drank whiskey that was older than my daughter, played chess in smoky pubs, and walked the green, misty hills. We talked about life, about getting older, about the strange and often painful duties of being a father. During one of those walks, looking out over a vast empty loch, I thought about my promise to Martha. For so long I believed that looking after Clara meant protecting her from the world, from her own poor choices. I see now how wrong I was. I was a crutch, allowing her to walk through life without ever developing the strength to stand on her own. By enabling her, I was complicit in the slow corruption of her character. The most loving thing I could have done, the act that truly honored my promise to my wife, was to get out of her way and let her feel the full crushing weight of her own actions. Maybe someday, from the rubble of the life she destroyed, she will build something better, something honest. I don't know if she will, and I've made my peace with the fact that I can't control that. It's her life to live, and her character to forge. My quiet was mistaken for weakness for 5 long years. I let my patience become passivity, my love become a license for disrespect. It's a mistake I think many people in my position make. We don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to lose what little connection we have with our children or our families. But there's a crucial difference between a boat and a life raft. And when your own child is the one drilling holes in the hull, you have a choice. You can go down with them, or you can cut them loose and save yourself. I chose to save myself, and in doing so,
I gave her the only real chance she ever had to learn how to swim. I'm curious to know what you all think. Was the invoice at my own birthday dinner a step too far, or was it the only language she would have understood? I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments below. Everyone's family is different, and there are no easy answers. If this story resonated with you, and you'd like to hear more stories of everyday people taking back their power, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It lets me know that these stories matter. Thank you for taking the time to listen to mine.